Well, hello everybody. I'm so delighted to introduce Delphi Ellis, and we're getting lots of people so far saying hello, which is absolutely wonderful to see. I will promise that I will say hello to you afterwards, but for now I just want to introduce Delphi. She's a qualified counsellor, a wellbeing trainer, a mindfulness practitioner, and she started her career in grief and bereavement, especially dealing with those that had committed suicide or the death was through murder. So that must have been quite an emotional experience, but also very healing what Delphi's work does. She's very good at promoting wellness in the workplace, and she really helps to put the sparkle back into her life. Now, Delphi has written a book, Answers in the Dark: Grief, Sleep, and How Your Dreams Can Heal You. Let me say that again. Second serve. Answers in the Dark: Grief, Sleep, and How Dreams Can Help Heal. And Delphi's no stranger to TV and radio. She's been on This Morning, Loose Women, and a whole group of other different media. And what she's very well known for is dreams and talking about sleep. And it's actually from a very young age that Delphi was introduced to sleep and talking about dreams and how they were sleeping, as she used to talk about it around the family breakfast table. So I'm so happy and grateful to introduce Delphi. So is there anything I missed out there before we start?
What a great introduction. Thank you so much, Paul. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here. And no, you captured that really well. Thank you. It's been an interesting career, and but yeah, you're right. It started very young.
Excellent. So I'm going to say some hellos here. Hello to Cowabunga, to Carol, to Leah, to Joe, to Soldier, to my good friend Nanny Lynn Sindri. Patricia is here. Did I say Joe? I think I've always said Joe, but hello. Oh, hello to Wendy. If I've missed anybody, I do. Oh, Holly's here. Lorna's here, so they're all coming in now, which is good. So hello to Holly and Lorna. Absolutely amazing. And this is going to be an amazing show tonight. Naomi as well. Hello to you. So we'd like to talk about the breakfast table chats, which first of all, I guess, was like the seed, if I like to put it that way, of getting into the interest and great work you do with dreams.
Yeah, so I had quite an unusual childhood for most people, I would say, that grew up in the UK. I think for me, I thought it was quite normal to sit around the breakfast table and talk about the dreams we'd had the night before. That was something my mum used to ask over the breakfast table, was what had I dreamt about the night before. It was only really when I went to school that I realised that wasn't the kind of thing that average people did. I remember once going into the playground quite excited, wanted to talk about a dream I'd had, and my friends sort of looking at me as if to say, what are you talking about? But I will add that my childhood was unusual from the wider perspective as well, in the sense that, I mean, to the outside world, we looked like quite a normal family, but behind closed doors, it was more like a scene from Charmed. You know, we had a statue of Aphrodite in the front room, we had a black cat, and I used to fall asleep listening to my mum doing the I Ching, you know, the Chinese divination tool. So for me, that was normal. You know, it was quite normal for me to come home from school, find my mum doing the tarot, you know, or other forms of scrying and things like that. So, but as I say, that was quite normal for me. And then as I got older, I decided I wanted to work in a therapeutic setting. And so later on in life, I trained as a counsellor. And it wasn't by design. It was just so happened that people wanted to talk to me about the dreams that they were having. And by extension of that, many of them were struggling to get a good night's sleep as well. So it kind of just formed that way. And the work around bereavement that I've done, I didn't go into that by design. It just so happened that I kind of fell into that world. Some of that, I think, was influenced by my own history. My dad died when I was a teenager. I think that definitely set the trajectory for my life in terms of the work that I now do. But at the same time, you know, people wanted to talk to me, as I say, about the dreams they were having, their quality of sleep. And again, it wasn't by design that it so happened that most of the people I worked with had were bereaved people that had a family member who'd taken their own life or died through homicide. So it wasn't by design, it just kind of happened that way. But it's been really quite a profound experience to be able to work with people going through such a difficult time.
Thank you. And I am sorry to hear about your dad dying when you were a teenager. I'd like to say hello to Alison and Charles who have joined. We've had Jo, and I did put it up earlier, and she actually said that they talk about dreams as a family, and I was quite surprised that at school nobody wanted to talk about it. I mean, I did go to a Steiner school, so that might be one of the reasons. But we would love talking about the weird and wonderful thing. Well, not that dreams are weird, but the unusual things that maybe schools didn't really speak about at all. So yeah, how would it sort of come out? Because it's not usually, because I work with clients one-to-one, and usually people don't really talk about their dreams or what I would do. So without obviously going into, because what you were talking with people was like huge trauma, but how would the general thing come out of people saying I'm going to start talking about these dreams and the difficulties of sleeping, unless somebody's got insomnia, but even then dreams don't usually come out in my line of work.
Yeah, so for me, what tended to happen was, one of the sort of first questions that I would ask people is how were they sleeping? And it would perhaps be by extension that they might then tell me about dreams that they've had. But certainly in the work that I've done with bereavement, one of the most common things that people want to talk about having been bereaved is when they have what we call a visitation dream. So when their deceased loved one appears to them in a dream, and they would want to have a conversation about that, because they would want to know, is it real? Is it important? Does it matter? And one of the things I talk about in my book, Answers in the Dark, I talk about visitation dreams, and I kind of put them into two categories. So we've got the category of dream, which is what I call nighttime therapy. And that's where the dream is very much recognizing that there's perhaps some unresolved conversations, there's some unsaid or unfinished business. And so that will sometimes work its way through as what I call nighttime therapy. So that would be where the deceased person comes to them in a dream, but in the dream, there's something about it that's not quite right. So it might be that the deceased loved one is being unkind, or the dream itself is quite traumatic, and that would never be a visitation dream. In my experience over the last 20 years, visitation dreams, authentic visitation dreams as I call them, when the dreamer wakes up in the morning, they wake up as if something very special has just happened. So to give you one example, when a person's been bereaved and their deceased loved one comes to them in a dream, the person will often appear to them very, very well. So let's say, for example, in the work that I did, say they had died a violent death, or they had died in such a way that they weren't even able to see the body because of, the trauma to the body or what have you. In the dream, the person would appear to them very happy, very well, and certainly no sign of any injury, certainly no sign of any trauma. So that's one of the ways that I kind of differentiate between what I call this nighttime therapy and what I would consider to be an authentic visitation dream. So in an authentic visitation dream, the dreamer would wake up in the morning feeling as if something really special has just happened. They would know that that person has perhaps offered some wisdom in the dream. There was perhaps something in the dream that kind of caught their attention. And yes, it's a sense of calm. So that would be something that people would experience, a real sense that something beautiful and something magical has just happened. Whereas when it's nighttime therapy, so an example of that would be where a person has died by suicide. Sometimes a person will have a dream that their loved one appears to them in the dream and says things like, you should have known, you should have known I wasn't okay. And that is what I call nighttime therapy. That is often the unresolved, the unfinished business kind of working its way through and it coming out to us in that dream in that way. So that's why I make the point of distinguishing these types of dreams, because it's important that we recognize that dreams are often offering us so much more than what we might at first realize. Because sometimes people, knowing that visitation dreams happen, will be worried if they've had that kind of disturbing dream that their loved one is angry with them, and that's just not the case. An authentic visitation dream is very calm, very peaceful, and that person will wake up in the morning feeling like something really special has just happened.
That's lovely. Couple of things. Joe is put a comment on which I put on earlier. Completely and utterly, agree with it. It says, so you wake up feeling calm, and it's something really lovely about it. My dear friend Nanny Lynn Sindri, she put up earlier that she used to do dream analysis. I know she absolutely loves dreams, and in fact, her name was at work called Dream Witch. Correct me if I got it wrong. Also want to say hello to Dree. And there's Lorna here, and I did see another name pop up actually. That I was going to say hello to, but say hello again if I don't mention your name, and I will do my best to say hello back. I flagged this one up because it's different to what we were talking about just a second ago, but it just got me thinking. This is what Joe says, and it's something very similar to me. If I lay on my left hand side, 9 times out of 10, I'll remember my dreams when I woke up. And that's really interesting that Joe actually put that, because I'm actually naturally a face sleeper, sort of head right in the pillow, kind of face planter in the pillow. If I have a absolutely horrendous nightmare, I tend to find I'm on my back when I get it, and that's most of the time I'll wake up on my back. Is there anything to do with the positions and you sleeping on about dreams? Is that anything you come up before, or me and Joe one-offs here?
No, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for the position that we sleep in. Some people will find that if they sleep in certain positions, that they certainly get a better quality sleep. And if you get a better quality sleep, you're going to get a better night's dreaming. It's as simple as that. If certainly if you find that sleeping on your side, for example, is the best place or the best position for you to sleep in, you're going to have a better quality sleep, and by extension, you'll have a better night's dreaming. But I also think it's interesting because sometimes people will know that so I'm thinking particularly of predictive dreaming, for example. This is something I talk about in Answers in the Dark as well. One of the most fascinating things that I found through my research of talking to people, hundreds and hundreds of people over the last 20 years, was the different way that people knew that their dreams were to some extent predictive just by the way that their dream appeared to them. So I'm thinking of one lady, she told me that she always knew that her dreams were going to come true if in the dream she was standing in a puddle. So that was just how her dream appeared to her. But she knew that if she had a dream and she was standing in a puddle, she knew that to some extent that dream was going to come true in some way. Other people found that if they dreamt in, those old-fashioned photographs, so that sort of sepia color, not quite black and white, sort of a yellowy kind of black and white. People that I spoke to said that if they dreamt in that sepia tone, then they knew that their dreams were going to come true. So this is one of the reasons why I actively encourage people to keep a dream diary, because if you keep a dream diary, you will be able to start to spot patterns in your dreaming, even if it's just an everyday dream, an anxiety dream, for example, or a dream that follows a bereavement. You'll be able to start to notice patterns in your dreaming, and then you'll be able to kind of make, by extension of that, you'll be able then to start to make sense of them, because you'll start to be able to think, okay, whenever that happens in my dream, this happens. So I think that's one of the ways we can kind of start to notice those patterns. And again, if you know that when you sleep on your side, or if you sleep on your back, you have a nightmare, then again, it's worth keeping a record of that, because you might find that there's a pattern to that. You might find that there's a pattern to you having that nightmare and why you have it when you do.
Interesting. Lynn says she's really pleased that you've been here. She's been waiting for tonight because she loves her dreams.
Oh, amazing.
Good. So I heard you say before that the best person to interpret your dreams is yourself. And I know, and you must get it all the time, because when I saw the Loose Women program you're in the first time, they're all saying, I dream this, what does it mean? So if you can say about why we are the best to interpret our dreams, but you do also go into a few common things which certain things can point to as references in a dream. So if you can talk about those two things,
yeah.
please.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I firmly believe is that the best person to decide what their dream means is the dreamer, because they have within them their own personal dream dictionary based on their experiences, the environment they grew up in, the culture, the traditions that they believe in. And one of the things that I'm always really careful to say is that I think, certainly in the West, we have fallen into the trap of westernizing a lot of these really profound experiences. So mindfulness is another example of that. We've really westernized mindfulness to the point where some people now call it McMindfulness, because it's become a bit of a takeaway tip. And so I think we have to be really careful that we don't westernize our dream experiences by kind of just looking at one bite of the apple. So I'll give you an example. Whenever I talk about dreams, most people will say things like, oh yeah, I've heard of Carl Jung, or I've heard of Sigmund Freud. Well, that's great, but remember that they are Western psychoanalysts. They were Western philosophers when it comes to understanding our dreams, and they were over the last 100 years. So when we think about dreams and in dream interpretation from that Western perspective, and people start talking about archetypes and things like that, they're looking at that through the lens of a westernized perspective based on the work of two people over the last 100 years. But what we have to remember is that dreams are something that we have been exploring for thousands of years. And it's not just exclusive to that Western world. So in the East, for example, and certainly in some, if you think about Native American, indigenous people, if you think about Aborigines, and Maori cultures, for example, they have very specific ideas about what dreams mean and how important they are in terms of the wealth and the health of the village. And many of them see our dreams as a divine portal, a divine doorway between here and the afterlife. So I think it's really important when we talk about dreams as an entire topic that we don't fall into the trap of just looking at it from that westernized perspective, because otherwise we run the risk of just getting one bite of the apple. So it's one of the reasons why I refer to myself as a dream explorer rather than a dream analyst these days, just for that simple reason, because for me it's an exploration, because the dreamer has everything they need to understand it ultimately, but they might just need, a little bit of insight or a little bit of wisdom, or, maybe offering some perspectives, or it could be this, it could be that. And that's where the one of the reasons I offer these themes in the book, because you can, generally speaking, you can put dreams into certain categories. So for example, I talk about anxiety dreams. There are certain types of anxiety dream that people will have, and certainly there are certain types of dreams that we have around death and dying, around bereavement, around grief as a whole topic. And so that's one of the reasons why I have this kind of perspective that we need to look at it big picture. I tell this story in the book, in Answers in the Dark. There's a story about Masnavi, which is a story by Rumi, where he talks about these gentlemen who are asked to describe what it is they can touch. So they're blindfolded, and these men go up to this object and they start to touch this object, and they start describing what they think they're touching. So one describes it as a drain pipe, another one describes it as the leg of a table, and what they're actually touching is an elephant. They're all touching exactly the same thing, which is an elephant, but they are describing it from their own perspective. So one of them thinks it's a drain pipe, another one thinks it's a table. And that's why I make the point that when we look at dream analysis or dream exploration, we need to take the blindfolds off and look at the whole picture, rather than just looking at it from one perspective like Freud or Carl Jung, because they're offering just one bite of the apple.
I've had three different ones, and they all kind of were related to each other. So Jo was saying that she knows now how to wake herself up from a dream. Alison's was saying that she can wake herself up from a dream and go back and change it from bad to good. And this kind of leads on to Patricia's, can you learn to lucid dream? So if we can talk about lucid dreaming, I've actually seen sold that like these face masks you can wear that start flashing a light when you're dreaming, so you can become aware that you're dreaming and start changing your dreams. So we can start talking about lucid dreaming. Is it something you experience yourself?
Yeah, so the most common time that I experience lucid dreaming, which is, for those that haven't heard of it before, lucid dreaming is when you become aware of the fact you are dreaming in a dream. And what tends to happen is one of a few things. So for some people, they will become aware that they are dreaming and they'll wake up. It's almost like their brain goes, oh, I'm dreaming, and then they wake up. But for other people, they are aware that they're dreaming and then think, well, whilst I'm here, I might as well try and control my dream. So for those that said, they can control their dreams, that's effectively what they're doing. They've become lucid. They've become aware of the fact that they're dreaming. A great researcher on this, by the way, for those listening, if people are interested in the subject of lucid dreaming, is Charlie Morley. And I reference Charlie's books in my book. I had the pleasure of hearing him talk, and he is a phenomenal character, and he's written heaps on the subject of lucid dreaming and why it can be so helpful in terms of processing difficult feelings, for example. But whenever I've become lucid in a dream, it's when I'm flying. And I think one of the reasons for that is because my brain is saying to me, this can't be real because you're flying. And when I'm talking about flying, I mean like Superman, as opposed to flying in an aeroplane. That's a whole other type of dream. So in my dreams, when I'm flying, that is usually when I become lucid, because my brain knows that I'm not really flying. I must be dreaming. And it's at that point that I can control. So in my dreams, I fly like Iron Man. And it's so interesting because, again, over the years, I've spoken to so many people who can fly in their dreams. And every single person I've spoken to flies differently. So some people fly like Superman, some people do breaststroke, some people do front crawl, some people, like me, that it's almost like an Iron Man experience. So in my dreams, I've got thrusters in my hands, and if I push the thrusters down, I'll go up. If I let the thrusters off, I go down. If I lean forward, I go fast. If I lean back, I slow down. And so that's how I always know I've become lucid, because I'm very much aware, but I'm then able to stay asleep and carry on this process. Now, Charlie explains and I just cover this briefly in my book, but Charlie goes into much more detail about this in his book, is that there are then even greater levels of lucidity. So for the people that manage to stay awake and know that they are dreaming and be able to control their dreams, that's one level of lucidity. But for them, there is still a level of, but I can't walk through walls, and I can't, because they're still applying, if you like, that modern day physics element to it. Whereas other people, not only have they become aware that they are lucid, but they have also then become aware of the idea that we are beings of light, and therefore we can pass through everything. So the wall itself is just it's just another manifestation of light. And so in their dreams, they will actually move through walls and various other things. So yeah, it's a fascinating topic. And as I say, one, if you are interested in Charlie's work, he's always doing workshops. But definitely it's a fascinating topic to know about.
Just talking before I mention this next one, Joe just says when I fly, I run and up and take off.
Oh, there you go.
It's funny enough, is that's just sprung to mind before I asked this one. Is that one of my friends' dads has a dream that he can fly, but it's very similar sort of way to the way I dream. It's more like I sort of hover. A bit like, David Blaine's kind of sort of hovering and then come back down. So it's more like that rather than up in. But Iron Man, that sounds really cool.
Yeah, I love
it. So Charles says, since my NDE, I am able to dream travel in so many different places. Do you find after people that are talking about near-death experiences that their dreaming changes and more profound things happen?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people that have had a near-death experience or even an out-of-body experience, many of them will talk about, for example, their experiences of light, and how, for example, when you transcend, lots of people who've had a near-death experience will talk about almost like transcending the universe and the colours and the bright lights and things like that, which is so, so beautiful. Nothing like, you can't really explain it, but it's very, very profound. So it makes sense that they are able to experience the world, even through their dream world, very differently. But I mean, I'm thinking about when I was younger, and I remember this dream to this day. I remember, and it was a flying dream. So I remember flying around the turrets of this castle. So I was in the sky and I was flying around this castle, and I'd never seen it before. I didn't know where this castle was. I remember waking up in the morning and thinking, you know, I've never been there. I don't know where that is. And I've certainly never seen it from above. I've certainly never seen it from the sky. And years later, there was an advert for a very famous airline company. And there was the castle. It was there, clear as day. And it was doing this aerial view of the castle. And I remembered thinking, oh my gosh, that is the castle. That is exactly what I saw. Never been there in my life. And yet I saw this as clear as day in my dream. And so I think some people will have these very creative, almost sort of fantasial dreams, you know, with Dungeons and Dragons and you know, those kinds of almost like Game of Thrones stuff, without having had that near-death experience. But certainly those that have, I think it's fair to say, because so many of them can then describe this exceptional journey of light and these wonderful colours and seeing the universe and the galaxies and things like that, it makes sense that they're going to experience their dream world differently as well.
Exactly. And funny enough, before I say Joe's question here, I often have dreams of going back to the same place. So, and again, it's somewhere I've never been, but it's kind of quite often come into a dream. It's like, oh yeah, I'm here again, and it's not like I realize I'm dreaming at that point. It's like, oh, it's just kind of a repetitive kind of sort of thing. Very nice though. Is that a common thing that people keep going back to same places in dreams?
Yeah, definitely. And again, this is another reason why the dream diary can be so helpful, because you might find that you dream of that particular place every time you've been talking about somewhere or someone or something. And that's why your dream diary can be so helpful, because it will point you towards what that is about. And the reason I sort of say this so confidently is, years and years ago, before I specialised in this arena, when I was thinking about becoming a counsellor, I remember having this recurring dream. And I only realised this a little while later when I went back and actually looked at my dream diary. But around the time when I was looking to become a counsellor, and I didn't know where I fitted in, I didn't know kind of what my niche was going to be or what arena I wanted to work in, I was having a recurring dream that I couldn't find a parking space. So I'd be driving around this car park that I didn't know, that I'd never been to, but I was driving around this car park looking for a parking space. The minute I decided the arena I was going to move into, which was bereavement, I've never had that dream again. So it was almost like the dream was telling me, you're just trying to find where you fit in. You're just trying to find out where you belong. And that's going to happen, but it's just not happening at the moment. But then once I found where I belong, you know, once I found my niche, if you like, or the area, the arena that I want to work in, a better way of putting it, I've never had that dream again. So that's why, if you're dreaming about a particular place, even if it's nowhere you've ever been, but I will say as well, dreams being as interesting as they are, I remember once vividly going into a new town that I'd never been to before. And as soon as I walked onto these cobble streets, I remembered looking at the cobble street thinking, I've been here before, but I hadn't been in waking life. It just felt so familiar to me. And I remember in waking life, in this town that I'd never been to before, I remember walking along this cobble street, looking up, and in front of me, there was a pub, and etched into the stonework of the pub, it just said The Bank. That's all it was. It just said The Bank. That was the name of the pub. Anyway, I went back to my dream diary when we got back, and years before, and I found it amazingly quite easily, but years before, I described in my dream diary me walking up this cobble street, and in my dream I described going into a bank. So in my dream, it was a bank, but in waking life, it was a pub that was called The Bank. And it transpired that the pub used to be a bank. That's what it had been before. And so that gets us onto the subject of past life dreaming, you know, how we can experience past lives through our dreams as well. And again, one of the things that I say to people with that in mind is, one of the ways that people have said to me they could differentiate between a past life dream. And let's not forget, for example, Carl Jung, if we mention him for a minute, he postulated that we inherit the memories of our ancestors at the point of conception. So it makes perfect sense, if we hold that theory to be true, it makes perfect sense that we would have dreams of our ancestors, that we would have dreams of, of our predecessors. And so, but one of the ways that you can tell an authentic past life dream from, say, you dreaming that you're in a past situation is, say, for example, if I was dreaming of, I don't know, let's say a medieval banquet, let's say, and in the dream, it looks authentic, everyone's wearing authentic medieval clothing. But at some point during the banquet, someone's mobile phone goes off. That's how you know it's not an authentic past life dream, because a current day object wouldn't be in a past life dream. You would be dreaming the memory as it was in the past life. So yeah, it's a fascinating subject, and it kind of gets us thinking about, again, what I was saying earlier. One of the things I kind of ask in Answers in the Dark is that we just open a conversation. There will be people out there who want to look at this from the science perspective, but my answer to that is, well, then let's do the research on it. Let's open our minds. Let's get people talking about their experiences, how prevalent they are, how many people are having dreams that predict the future, how many people are having dreams that they would describe as a past life dream. And let's talk about it. Let's expand that research, rather than just putting it into the bracket of, oh, no, that sounds a bit too left field. We don't want to go there. And that's what Answers in the Dark is all about, really. It's about opening the conversation, and it's surprising how many people have had those types of dreams.
Absolutely. And when I was younger, I used to think, oh, it's probably because there's like Second World War films on TV all the time. Don't worry, I will ask you a question in a second, Joe. But I used to dream that I was in the American Army, and I was rescuing paintings and bits of art. And then it was years later they released a film called Monuments Men. So it does,
I love that
make you
film.
think. So yeah, it does make you think.
Yeah.
Joe says, REM, rapid eye movement, can be the reason you remember dreams when you wake up. Is it actually the remembering? I thought it was actually the process of it causing you to dream the rapid eye movement. So if you can go into that.
Yeah, cool. So we know that we sleep in stages, thanks to the work of people like William Dement. We know that we sleep in stages, and depending on which piece of paper research-wise you read, we have 4 to 5 stages of sleep. And one of those stages is known as rapid eye movement. And it is rapid eye movement which is the stage of sleep most commonly associated with dreaming. Now, some researchers are starting to suggest that we dream at other times in the night, but most commonly we recognize rapid eye movement is the process, as you described it, of us having a dream at that point. Now, what's really interesting about that is, for some people, they will wake up in the middle of rapid eye movement sleep, and so they will remember their dream, like Joe says. But if they then fall back to sleep, they will go back into that dream because they haven't completed the sleep cycle. And the way that our sleep cycles work, they work like this, kind of like in a circular motion, as opposed to when we wake up, we don't kind of go back, if you see what I mean. We just keep going from where we left off. And so if we wake up in the middle of rapid eye movement sleep, then it makes sense that we'll fall back to sleep and go back into the dream we were just having, which is great if you're having a lovely dream, not so great if you're having a nightmare. And so, of course, what will happen then is, for those people that have woken up in the middle of their rapid eye movement sleep, they potentially will go back to sleep into their nightmare that they've just left. Now, if you know how to wake yourself up, like one of your viewers said a moment ago, they can wake themselves up from that. That's okay. But again, one of the things I say, our dreams are like friends. They're trying to give us some wisdom. They're very much looking on the outside in, like a lot of our friends are. But the problem is, of course, is that we don't always pay attention. We don't always listen to our friends. We kind of take what they say with a pinch of salt. And so we might not necessarily listen to that wisdom. And of course, the thing then, if we don't listen to the dream, if we don't pay attention to the dream, it will do one or two things. It will either leave us alone, because if you ignore your friends long enough, they will leave you alone. They won't bother you anymore. Or depending on the message they need to pass on, depending on the wisdom they need to deliver, they will get louder. And so the recurrence of the dream will become, more regular. So if it's, say it's monthly, usually it will perhaps become weekly or nightly, or it will become more graphic, and so it will turn into a nightmare. So this again makes the case for paying attention to dreams when we remember them, so that we can get ahead of whatever it is they're trying to tell us.
Great stuff. Lorna says here, I wonder if I sometimes, very rarely, visit the afterlife, such as astral travelling, and visit loved ones over there. I wonder, as the houses, etc., they are in aren't the same as they lived here. Astral travelling and seeing loved ones through dreams. I mean, you did say a little bit about visitation dreams as well, but astral travelling.
Yeah, so one of the things that I talk about in Answers in the Dark is that you can talk to people in your dreams. Before you go to bed at night, if you wanted to, you could actually say, if you're going to meet me in my dreams tonight, can you tell me? Can you tell me where are you? Where are you? What are you experiencing right now? And so, that's okay. We are allowed to do that. Sometimes I know for a fact when I've had this kind of experience in my dreams, sometimes the message is just so what, and it takes a little while to unravel it. But there's nothing wrong with, before you go to bed, kind of saying, oh, if my loved one is going to meet me in my dreams tonight, I'd really like to know, where are they? Is that the house they're living in where they are right now? Or are they living in, a completely different reality? Is their reality so different to where we are that it just looks completely different? But the other thing I think about as well is when we have these types of dreams, if we're having them quite regularly, that we can start to notice patterns. And that's again where your dream diary would be quite useful. So you might find that you have a dream about your loved one in that house, because for all we know, that house might be somewhere we're about to move to. They might be showing us a house that we're about to move to. Who's to say? We don't know. So that's where, again, it can be so useful to keep a dream diary and actually note all the details of the house. So that, a bit like me with my, it was actually Torquay that I'd never been to, where I saw this cobbled street and the bank. A bit like me, when I went to Torquay, I just knew that I'd been here before. So yeah, if you look in your dream diary, write down the details of that house. Maybe this isn't a house they lived in, but maybe they're showing you one that you might. So again, it's just worth keeping an open mind.
Nanny Lynn Sindri, Delphi, what is your take on long and very detailed dreams, please? Cry, talk, laugh, and shout in my dreams.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for that question. So I think one of the things that we can kind of look at with dreams is some people will experience their dreams completely through their senses. So, some people will be able to talk, they'll be able to, very much like you were saying, have whole conversations with people. And that's quite normal. That would be quite a standard dream. But for example, in my dreams, I remember once eating the most delicious cheese and cucumber sandwich, and I tasted it, and I remember tasting it. I can taste it now, how delicious it was. And I think sometimes this is very much to do with how much we embrace the dream world. So if we are able to really embrace the world through our senses, which if you practice meditation and mindfulness, you'll be doing that anyway. But also, I would say, when we're talking about very long, very detailed dreams, some people, if, say, for example, they're very creative in waking life, so, and I'll give you an example of this. So say, for example, if I was to say, what color is, if I show you the cover of my book, so if I was to sort of say, what color is this? And somebody was to say, well, it's blue, then they might have a dream that's just very kind of standard. Whereas if you'd said to me, oh, it's a baby blue with a hue of indigo, and there's a tiny kind of swirl of, whatever, the length to which you would describe something during the day to some way goes to, by extension, how you might experience the dream world at night. So if you experience the day in colourful, beautiful detail, then you are likely to experience the dream world the same way. So I think the only thing I do say to people, and I've done this before where I've gone on the telly, is if it takes a person half an hour to tell me their dream, it's going to take me at least an hour to explore it with them, because there's so much content, there's so much detail there to unpack with them. And so again, that's another reason for advocating for the dream diary, because of course the more detail you get into your dream, the more you write down, the more likely you are then to be able to make sense of it. And that's not to say, you know, some people will have a recurring dream, I don't know, about snakes, or they'll have a recurring dreams about a particular house. That doesn't mean their dream quality is any less than someone who's having, you know, a really creative dream. But also, and this is important, let's not forget that famous people throughout history have used their dreams to influence their work. So Stephanie Meyer, who wrote the Twilight Saga, the story of Bella and Edward, you know, the vampires and werewolves, she dreamt that. She dreamt those books from start to finish, as I understand it, in one night. Now, when she woke up in the morning, she didn't sit there and think, what's the symbolic reference of me dreaming about werewolves? Or what's the symbolic reference of me dreaming about vampires? She didn't do that. She knew she'd been given a book. And so whilst I'm not going to say that everybody listening can, you know, use their dreams to make a fortune like Stephanie Meyer did, we can certainly look at them as ways to influence our creative work, whether it's paintings. Vincent van Gogh said, I dream my painting and I paint my dream. Keith Richards dreamt the riff to I Can't Get No Satisfaction. You know, so if we can kind of look at our dreams that way, then we could consider that, again, it's expanding that idea that they are just the subconscious rattling of our mind. Do you see what I mean? It's that whole thing. It's not just the subconscious rattling of our mind. If we can kind of put them into that broader perspective, they might even be able to work for us. You know, we can use them as a valuable resource.
Brilliant. I must say hi to Annie, Jules, Jill, Joe, Steve, Shazza. I think I've got that right. Anybody else? Steve? Yep. So, oh, Claire. Hello to all of you joining. I've pulled this one up. Patricia, are dreams, hallucinations, and daydream? Are dreams, hallucinations, and daydreams from the same part of the brain?
Yeah, so what's really interesting about this is that researchers over the years have tried to pinpoint the part of the brain that deals with the dreaming process. So we know, for example, that dreaming plays a role in storing memory. So it's not just sleep that helps us remember, it's actually the process of dreaming that helps us remember. And you'll know this because if you've ever had a rubbish night's sleep, the next day someone will say things to you, don't you remember we had this conversation yesterday? And you'll be like, no, I don't remember that. And that's why we're forgetful, because the process of dreaming hasn't, you know, we perhaps weren't dreaming long enough to store the memory. But over the years, researchers have tried to pinpoint the various parts of the brain that deal with things like daydreams, hallucinations, and those and dreams themselves and nightmares. And every time a researcher has said, yep, it's that part of the brain, someone has come along with, say, for example, an acquired brain injury. You know, they had an accident and damaged that part of their brain and said, yeah, but I still dream. So I think when we talk about the neuroscience of it, and that's not my area, by the way, but, you know, when we talk about the neuroscience of it, I think it's really important, again, to keep an open mind, because for some people, I mean, some people will say, for example, that the left part of the brain deals with logic and the right part of the brain deals with creativity. So could we argue then that dreams come from the right part of the brain? But then researchers now are starting to tell us, actually, it's not that simple. It's not a case of logic being left and you know, creativity being right. It's actually more about looking at the whole brain, because we know that when the brain gets injured, it just creates a new pathway. It just creates a new pathway of adapting and coping with whatever's happened. So I think it's a long way of saying the jury's still out in terms of where our dreams actually come from, scientifically speaking. But one of the things I talk about in Answers in the Dark is, I think what a lot of us want to know is, what if it's more than that? You know, what if dreams are, like I said, this divine doorway, and actually they're a way of that's coming to us from outside the body? That's not to say it is, you know, that's not to say it is that. And that's certainly not to say that the science isn't important, because it is. But I think, again, it's so important that we keep an open mind and think, right, you know, let's broaden the scope a little bit.
Lovely. And I will get into your book soon because you say it's a book in 3 parts, and I've ordered it, so I'm really looking forward to going through this. But I'd like to sort of say Steve's question first. We get in it. I have a recurring dream since I was a child. I can remember it vividly, and it's very basic in details, and always ends up with physical feelings when I wake up. It's interesting because I know that one of the things that used to be on TV, am I dreaming? People would pinch themselves, but I know pictures that I've missed the camera, but I fully know that I've had dreams where I've had full physical feelings. I've actually had tastes. I've had touch in dreams. So when you say about that, one, the feelings that people get, and other things that people get in dreams, and also as well, you dispel in your book and also in your talk some of the myths around sleep, and say about those as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that, again, we could explore with dreams is how different we can feel in the dream to how we feel when we wake up. So an example I'll give you, which I talk about in the book, is that some people will dream, for example, that they're having an affair with their boss. And in the dream, they are loving it, right? You know, they are totally enjoying it. But when they wake up, they are mortified because it is the last thing they would ever do. And it's the last thing they would ever want. And so this is one of the reasons why it can be so helpful to keep a dream diary, to kind of, first of all, think about, well, why did I have this dream? This is one of the questions I say in the book. Why this and why now? Right? Because that's going to help us start to unpack the dream and get to the bottom of it. But another thing to think about is, why did I feel so good in the dream, but I feel so awful now, you know, because that is just not what I would do. And that's why. So if we take sex as an example, sex in dreams is rarely about sex, very rarely. Percentage wise, it's very, very small percentage of dreams about sex are actually about sex. It's often about power, it's about control, it could even be about connection. So when we broaden the scope that way, it changes the way we explore it entirely. So if I really enjoyed having sex with my boss in my dream, but I'm mortified when I wake up because I would never do that, if I broaden the scope and think, well, hang on though, do I feel like I need to maybe control the situation with my boss a bit more? Do I feel like my boss is just too powerful? Do I feel like I need to gain some sort of control or connection over this situation? Suddenly it starts to make sense. You know, suddenly we can start to marry up why we felt so good in the dream, because we were able to control the situation, which in real life or waking life we can't. So yeah, feelings is a really interesting one, because we can't always, you know, when we look at it in the, you know, the literal sense, if we're looking at dreams like that literally, we would think, no, that is not what's happening, you know. But then when we broaden the scope and think, well, actually, what if it's about this? Then it starts to shift the way we were feeling and why.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a book, and it was basically it was a stocking filler when I was younger, and it was about dreams, and you kind of would flick through it and stuff like that. And I don't know if it was very Freudian, because what you said about like the dreams about sex usually are very little to do with actual sex in dreams, but it tended to be, you'd go through it, and about sort of, I think 70% of the book, you know, whatever you dreamt was some kind of sexual thing going on somewhere.
Yeah, that's Freud all over. And what's so interesting about that is, you're right, you can go through some of these dream dictionaries and it doesn't matter what you dream about. It could be a candle, a banana, a cigar, and it's all going to be phallic in some way. You know, it's all going to be a phallic reference. Whereas if you look at, you know, in other dream dictionaries that kind of broaden the scope a little bit, and one of the things I'm careful to say about my book is that it's not a dream dictionary, because again, I think as the dreamer, you're the best person to decide what it means. But if you look at some dream dictionaries, always look at the front of the dream dictionary, because usually in the sort of the introduction or what have you, they will tell you what their influence is. So if their influence was Sigmund Freud, you'll know what you're going to get as part of the package. If your influence was Carl Jung, you will get a much vaster, much broader, but he was very spiritual. You know, he had a real spiritual thing going on. And so he tended to offer a much broader scope. And he was actually a student of Sigmund Freud. Carl Jung was a student of Freud's. And he actually challenged Freud's perception on dreams. He was the one that said to him, I'm not sure you're quite there with that, you know, that reference. And of course, he was right. You know, he was right to challenge him, because as we know, dreams are much more than what we think they are.
I will read this before getting to the book because I think it's important. Since my eldest son died, I have 2 recurring dreams. In he is still alive in his coffin, and the other we go visit his grave, and it's moved, and it will be about the 5th time they've moved him, but they've not put his headstone on. And you can sort of suggest with that without putting you on the spot or anything like that.
No, that's yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Jules. And I'm so sorry that's happened. I think for me, again, it comes back to what I was talking about with the nighttime therapy. It's very much about being able to understand why you've had that dream when you do. So it might be, again, one of the things that I talk about in Answers in the Dark is the role that anniversaries play. It's so interesting that sometimes an anniversary will be coming up, and it's the dream that really brings that sharply into focus. So, and when I talk about anniversaries, I don't just mean like the anniversary of their death. I mean, it could be a birthday, it could be Christmas, it could be Mother's Day, it could be Father's Day, you know, those kinds of things. So that's where keeping a dream diary, again, can be so helpful, because you'll be able to make connections. Why has this dream come to the surface again? Why have I had that dream again? And so that's why I would encourage you to have a think about it as that form of nighttime therapy. What is the dream trying to speak to you about? Is there anything around those circumstances about, you know, where he's buried and you know, those kinds of things that kind of comes up for you? And again, those conversations that you would have liked to have had, things that you would have liked to have said, any unfinished business around, you know, that in itself is worth exploring, whether that's with the help of a counsellor or whether it's through your own dream diary, and kind of starting to understand the patterns that are in there. But thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Jules. I'm going to ask Soldiers a question just after, because I thought it'd be the ideal time to talk about your book now, and what people will find in it, because it's a 3-part book, your wonderful book, Answers in the Dark.
Yeah, so one of the things over the last 20 years is whenever I've talked to people about sleep, we always end up having the same conversations. And one of the reasons it took me so long to write, I talk about this in the book, is that it took me about 10 years to write. And the reason for that was because, first of all, the science kept changing. So every time, like I was saying earlier, we thought we knew, you know, this about sleep or that about sleep, that kept changing. New research was coming out all the time, and I was trying to make sure desperately that I included it in the book. But second of all was because I wanted to try and do it justice for the people that I was writing it for. And one day, this lady, I was talking to her, she didn't know that I was writing Answers in the Dark at the time, and she said, I wish you wrote a book, and I wish you wrote it the way you talk about it. And so that's what got me, that's very much why Answers in the Dark looks like it does now. Whenever I've spoken to people about it that have read the book, they said, oh, it's like you're in the room with me. It's like we're having a conversation. And that's deliberate. And the reason for that is because I talk about this in the book, is these big myths of sleep. So one of the first things, whenever I do a talk or an event, is I'll say to people, how much sleep do you think we need every single night? And without exception, almost every person will say to me 8 hours. They've got into this idea that we need 8 hours sleep. But that's a myth. That's a big myth. Everybody is different. What some people need, another person won't. So it makes perfect sense. When you're poorly, you need more sleep. When you're a teenager, you need more sleep. They're not being lazy. They do need a lay-in. You know, they need more sleep. When you're a baby, you need more sleep. So it makes sense that everybody is different. Some people need 6 hours. Some people need 10 hours sleep. So that's the first myth, is just busting that idea that we all need 8 hours because we're all different. The problem is that because we've bought into this myth that we all need 8 hours, What do? If you've got to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you work back 8 hours and you think to yourself, right, if I've got to be up at 6, I need to be in bed by 10. So what do? You take yourself off to bed at 10 o'clock because you think I've got to be up at 6 in the morning. But what if you're not sleepy at 10 o'clock? What if that's not your natural bedtime? And when I say to people, when do you go to bed? The most common answer they give me is 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Very rarely does anyone say to me when I'm sleepy. And yet that is exactly when you should be going to bed. So in the first part of the book, I bust these myths. I bust them wide open and talk about these myths about when we need to go to sleep, about whether or not it's natural to wake up at night, which it is, and whether or not we really need these 8 hours sleep. The second part of the book is what I call the sleep cycle repair kit. And that's very much offering these sort of tips and tools that I've talked to people about over the years. So even though the science has changed to some extent, the advice we give people is still very much along the lines of, learning to manage the mind at night, for example, through mindfulness activities and other things that can be useful. But again, one of the things that I bust in the sleep cycle repair kit is I talk about sleep hygiene. Now, most people know what sleep hygiene is. They know it's the habits that you have during the day, which will influence how well you sleep at night. And again, most people, when I talk to them, they know to not drink too much coffee. They know to have a nice warm bath before bed. They know not to look at their phones. So actually, when we talk about sleep hygiene, most people know what that is. And to be fair, most people are doing it. What we're not talking about is what I refer to in the book as situational insomnia. So it's not what you're doing during the day that might be stopping you sleeping, but what's happening to you during the day. So if you're going through a difficult time, if you're grieving, and in the book, I make the distinction about this. I talk about this in part of the book is, when I talk about grief, I'm not just talking about the death of a loved one. I'm talking about the loss of anyone or anything that mattered to you that's no longer there. So divorce, redundancy, that's all included in that conversation. And so that's the sleep cycle repair kit. I kind of bust open this conversation around sleep hygiene. And then the last part of the book is about dreams. So it's very much about providing a toolkit for people so that, again, rather than me providing a dream dictionary, it just gives people the opportunity to unpack and explore their own dreams, or at least get the process started.
Brilliant. And I know you can get it through Amazon. Is that the best place for you, or can people get it for you personally as well?
Yeah, they can order it from me personally, but they can also get it from Amazon, Hive, Barnes and Noble. There's most retailers. You can get it online through most retailers. If it's not in the store, then certainly you can get it online through most retailers.
Amazing. Now, Soldier flagged this one up before and I missed it. So here's again, Delphi. Every time I close my eyes to sleep, I see a little video playing in my mind's eye. It's places and people I don't recognize. What is this?
So there is this fascinating kind of little halfway house that we go into when we are going into sleep. And it's a state that people that do yoga and regular meditation practice can actually influence. When we're going into sleep, it's called the hypnagogic state. And when we're coming out of sleep, it's called the hypnopompic state. And it's almost like this little halfway house where you're not quite asleep, but you're not quite awake. And it's during that period that a lot of people will say it's almost like they're in a cafe. They can hear voices in the background, but maybe can't always pick up what they're saying, or they'll see certain faces, or they'll visit other times and places. So again, that you can use your dream diary to record those kinds of experiences to see if there's any patterns developing there, and to recognize that. But that's the time when you're most likely to have what's known as a hypnic jerk or a hypnic myoclonia. So that's where, and I talk about this in Answers in the Dark, but this is where you're just drifting off into that lovely sleep, and then it's almost as if you stepped off a curb or you've tripped over something and you suddenly jolt yourself awake, and that's known as a hypnic myoclonia. And again, the researchers are out on that. Some people say it's because you're overtired, that's why you do it. Some people suggest it's because you're stressed, that's why it happens. But again, it's always worth keeping a diary to see if you can kind of make sense of it. But certainly your bedtime routine will help with that as well. So the calmer your bedroom environment and the calmer your sort of bedtime is, the more likely you are to go off into a lovely, refreshing sleep, as opposed to if you do what I call the roadrunner effect, you know, where you be going at 100 miles an hour all day and then you stop, your head hits the pillow and your bed becomes this magical place that reminds you of all the things you haven't done today. So that's why the time before bed is so important, that we wind down.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying about the hypnagogic and hypnopompic, because, and it seems to be so, having a diary would be good and I can work out what happens. And it seems to be, I go through stages of it and I get hypnopompic hallucinations, but mine aren't like some people get horrible spinal things. Mine's are literally like patterns, they're like moving spiral graph patterns, what I see as I'm coming
Nice.
around from sleep. So yeah, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I love it.
When you're coming around. Lynn said, when I suffered with depression, I saw a counsellor. She was also a dream analyst. I told her about my dreams. We worked the dreams out between us. After that, I dreamt to order in a way. After 2 years with her, she said I could do what she does now. And yeah, Lynn's pointed at a few things what I've said as well, and she is really really good. I had some more of the questions coming up here, which I try and ask as many people's questions as possible. I did see Claire. She actually says, here we go. I need 8 hours sleep, but usually get 6. Now, what I was wondering, because of what you were saying before, is Claire really needing her 8 hours sleep, or is it because she thinks she really should be getting her 8 hours sleep? Also, there's this thing which I don't think I always dispelled it as a myth, but you get your larks and your night owls, and I'm most definitely a night owl. And when I worked in music venues, it was ideal being a night owl. But can you sort of change, you know, because the evening time is when I'm feeling like my most alert. Can we change it so we're more morning based and can change ourselves to be more lark?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I'll go back to the first one first, where we were saying, is it 8 hours, is it 6 hours? The best way for a person to determine how much sleep they need is by how refreshed they feel in the morning. And one of the traps we've fallen into with the development of modern technology is we now use sort of sleep trackers. So we'll wear something to bed which will tell us how well we've slept during the night and stuff like that. And one of the things that's done is that has created its own anxiety. So people will look at their sleep tracker and they'll think, oh, I only got 6 hours sleep last night. What's wrong with me? I'm not getting the 8 hours that I need, because they believe they need 8 hours. They're not going by how refreshed they feel. They're going by the fact that they believe they need their 8 hours, but they only got 6. What's wrong with me? Whereas what we could do is we could look at it from the perspective of how we feel. So if I feel refreshed when I wake up after 6 hours, then that's a good sign that I don't need more. Now, what some people do is inadvertently they set their alarm for right slap bang the middle of deep sleep. So they could get quite a refreshing night's sleep, but because they've set their alarm for when they're right in the middle of deep sleep, they wake up with what's known as the hangover effect. So they've got a banging headache, their mouth is dry, they're shaking, they don't know what year it is. Most people get this if they have an afternoon nap, by the way, because they don't sleep for long enough. They'll set their clock for an hour because they think, oh, I'll just have a cheeky hour's nap, not realizing that after an hour's sleep, you will be waking up right in the middle of deep sleep. And that's why they feel awful when they wake up. So what we could do is we could learn when we're naturally wakeful, and that would then help us start to think about, can I change my alarm time? So if, for example, I wake up naturally, and I wake up naturally at about 5, 5:30 every morning, and I'm full of the joys of spring. So I'm the opposite to you, Paul. I'm if we're calling them that, I'm the lark. But if I say, for example, I thought to myself, oh, I'm gonna have another hour, you know, it's far too early to get up now, I'm just gonna have another hour's sleep because I don't need to be up until 6. So I go back to sleep. Of course, not at that point. I'm setting my alarm for right in the middle of deep sleep. So I was wide awake, full of the joys of spring at 5. but at 6 o'clock I wake up and I'm dragging myself around for the rest of the day because I've woken myself up in the middle of deep sleep. So that's why it can be so important to look at when you're setting your alarm. When are you naturally wakeful? When do you feel naturally sleepy? I talk about all of this in Answers in the Dark, but it's important to think about your natural sleep cycles and how that works. If you know that you need 8 hours, as I think was what was being said, they know they need 8, but they're only getting 6. Again, have a think about your natural rhythms. Have a think about whether or not there are things that you could be doing to work out when you would be naturally sleepy and whether or not that can be doing. So if a person says they need 8 hours and they're only getting 6, they're about a sleep cycle short. So they still need another sleep cycle in there, which is about 90 minutes to 2 hours. So that's where it's going to be about improving sleep quality. And that will be thinking about not just what you're doing during the day, but how you can set yourself up for a refreshing night's sleep. So what you're doing before bedtime, and certainly also thinking about when you're setting your alarm for, because if you're waking up absolutely dog tired, that might be because you're setting your alarm for the middle of deep sleep.
Interesting, because I've had it before when I used to get up really incredibly early at certain points for certain work, and but I'd wake up say about 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and I'm great. I can get up. I feel like I could do now. And I think, well, I've set the alarm for 5, so it'd be silly not to fall back asleep. Wake up at 5, bang! I feel dreadful then at that point. So that's probably because of what you were saying just then.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I actually have a chapter in my book called The 4 a.m. Mystery, which is all about, why we do that, why we wake up in the middle of the night. And again, there's lots of different reasons for that. There's lots of different theories behind that. But to go back to your question about the larks and the owls, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for that. There definitely are people that would describe themselves as early risers, which I consider myself to be. And I've always been like that. But I say that there have been periods in my life where I've definitely come alive at night. So does that mean we can shift it? Possibly. Does it mean that we can use that to advantage? Definitely. If we can embrace like you did, with the work that you do. So if you've got people, for example, that they know they're night owls, they tend to kind of do that very well, then those people would perhaps embrace a night shift. They would perhaps embrace a job where they are that person. They can sleep well during the day, but they come alive during the night. So I think there's definitely something to be said for kind of working to your own rhythms, knowing what works for you and doing more of it. But of course, the challenge comes when you're a lark and your partner's an owl. That's where the challenge comes, because then, of course, your partner's wanting to go to bed at 9 o'clock. You're not ready to go to bed till 11 or 12. They want to get up at 5 or 6 in the morning, and you're not ready to get up until 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. And that's where the problems can start. So it is definitely about kind of working to your rhythms, but equally respecting each other's.
Exactly. Lynn's ordered your book, really looking forward to it. And what you said before, that Paul McCartney yesterday came up in a dream after losing his gran, I think it was. And Soldier, first of all, said that he suffered from exploding head syndrome. And Cameron asked, what's that mean? So this is what he said. Just as I'm dropping off to sleep, I hear someone bang on the door really loud, and it wakes me up. I usually look at Bootside, my my cat, to see if she heard it. So I also heard you say about hearing like names being called out, and sort of names where you're not quite asleep, you're not quite awake, but you really properly hear the name. So if you can also go into that and what Soldier said as well.
Yeah, so I think first of all, depending on our lived experiences. So if we've had lived experiences of loud bangs, whether that's working in the firework industry or whether it's, traveling abroad, in war zones and things like that, then that is obviously going to influence our dream content. So that's one of the reasons why people who've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress type disorders, they will be very sensitive and alert to those loud bangs and things like that. So that's one side of it, is, how much of what we have experienced during the day will show up and influence our dream content at night. The other thing to think about is, as you were saying, about how in my book I talk about this hearing your name at night. And I go into some detail about this in the book, because over the years when I've spoken to people about this, I've had so many different people give me their kind of take on it, why they think it happens. So for example, some people have said to me it's because they are in tune at that point in the night, they're kind of entering into another realm, and that they're basically being welcomed into that realm and stuff like that. Other people have said to me it's someone trying to get your attention, but because you're not listening during the day, they're having to get your attention at night, and that's why they call your name. So I had this experience. I was drifting off to sleep one night, and as clear as day, somebody said my name in an Irish accent. It was that clear. It was a woman's voice, Irish accent, and they said my name as clear as day. And I actually got up and had a look, because it was so, a bit like Soldier was saying, kind of looked at the cat to see, did you hear that? I actually had a look around, because it was that real. It was as if someone was in the room with me, but there wasn't. There was nobody there. And so this again is why it can be so helpful to notice these patterns in our dreams, because we might find that, if we can connect with that and say, well, yeah, maybe I'm not paying attention during the day, maybe I'm not picking up on signs, maybe I'm not picking up on the messages, that's why they're trying to get my, almost like, how sometimes people, like a teacher in class would go, Paul, like that, to kind of get your attention. That for some people is how they experience the name at night. And so that's where it's because, that might be trying to get our attention. So I actually have an activity in my book where I say to people, very much like I was saying earlier, you can ask the question. You can always, before you go back to sleep, you can say, can I meet you in my dream? Would you like to tell me why you called my name? Is there a reason you called me tonight? And that kind of thing. If it feels safe to do so, if you feel, whether you do grounding exercises or things like that before sleep, but, if it feels safe to do so, you can ask your dreams question. They're your friends. So you can ask them questions and say, why did I hear that? Might not get an answer straight away, but they might surprise you. You never know. So it is worth asking the question if you feel it might be helpful.
Brilliant. Excellent. Moira says, what about power napping? Because I've got a few personal development books, The Power of Power Napping. So I'd like to get your thoughts on power napping.
I'm a huge advocate of power naps. And again, this is an example, how I was saying earlier about how the science has changed. So over the years, there's been different takes on power naps. Should we power nap? Should we not power nap? And it's varied. In the early days, people were like, yeah, have a power nap as long as it doesn't stop you sleeping at night, have a power nap. Then we went through a phase of no, absolutely not. Do not power nap, no matter what you do. And then now we're kind of shifting back to that. Then, yeah, actually, if it feels like the right thing to do, then do it. I am a massive advocate of them for lots of different reasons. People who work shifts, I do a lot of work with police officers, and people who work shifts, like, police officers, or if it's in a warehouse, or paramedics, or, any of the blue light services, nurses, doctors, but, anyone that works in a warehouse overnight, you'll know that there comes a point during the day where you hit a brick wall. And a power nap can be just what you need. I was actually talking to a police officer recently who told me that at his station where he works, they actually they extend their lunch break. So instead of it just being an hour, they actually give them an hour and a half, so that if they need to have a power nap during their break, they can do so. And so there's two different takes on it. You can have a traditional power nap, which is your sort of 20 to 30 minutes. So you set your alarm for 20 to 30 minutes. You'll find that you just drift off into a really lovely light sleep, and then your alarm goes off and you feel full of the joys of spring, as if you've almost had like a decent night's sleep, but in the space of 20 minutes, which can really be helpful. Or if you've got longer and you can have sort of the length of your full sleep cycle. So about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on what your sleep cycle is. And but again, it's different for different people. So if you feel like that sort of 20 to 30 minute buzz would just work for you, that can be really helpful. But for someone who might need a bit longer, especially if you're poorly, having a nap in the afternoon can actually be quite helpful. Then just go the full length of your sleep cycle, however long that is. But yeah, I'm a massive advocate of them. I think if you need it, have it. If you can, realistically, and you need it, have it.
I'd like to say hello to Elaine, who joined us a few minutes ago. At least the first time I saw your name. Now, for a friend of mine, actually asked the question. You did go about people not getting enough sleep and the 8 hours earlier. But I've heard you say, and other people say, all of us dream all the time. It just depends whether you remember it or not. But I know some people who absolutely say, I don't dream. It just never happens. I never dream. What is it that's going on with those people that don't remember them at all and actually will be absolutely convinced that they do not dream in their life or never do?
Yeah, I've met people that have said that to me, and the evidence is this: we know that if you weren't dreaming every night, you'd be really poorly. It's as simple as that. You'd have no memory, and you'd be quite poorly during the day. So we know that we all dream every single night. Scientifically speaking, that's considered a fact. The reason we don't remember them is varied. So for some people, I talk a little bit about this in Answers in the Dark, but for example, in the research I did, people who meditate are more likely to remember their dreams than those who don't. People who smoke are less likely to remember their dreams than those who don't smoke. Women are more likely to remember their dreams than men. But I will add to that again, it very much depends on your relationship with dreams, because if you grew up in an environment where you're say whenever you had a bad dream, your kind of your caregiver, your parent or whoever said to you, oh, don't worry about it, your dreams don't mean anything, then you will have grown up believing that. You will have grown up believing that dreams don't mean anything, so there's no reason to remember your dreams. Whereas if you've grown up as I did in an environment where they were embraced, they were talked about over the breakfast table, you're more likely to remember them. So the key is placing an importance on them. If you place an importance on remembering your dreams, you're more likely to remember them.
Interesting. Hello to Shy Ghost. Moira asks, can Delphi explain about the sleep bus?
Yeah. So in my book, I talk about sleep is like a bus. And if you miss the bus, you have to wait for the next one. So in the work that I've been doing over the last 20 years, whenever I've talked to people about their sleep, what tends to happen is a person starts to feel sleepy. Let's say, just for argument's sake, they say 9 o'clock. They start to feel sleepy at 9 o'clock, but they push through it. So Game of Thrones is on, or they've got to do the washing up, or they've got to do various other bits and pieces. What happens when you push through it is you're pushing away what we call your sleep pressure. So the sleep pressure reduces. That the sleep pressure is what makes you feel sleepy. So when you're sat in front of the telly and your eyes start going like this, that's sleep pressure building. And that's the sign for you to go to sleep. But what we tend to do is, oh no, it's far too early. I can't go to bed at 9 o'clock. I'm going to push through. If you push through, you have to wait for that sleepiness to come back round again. So that's what I mean by the bus. When I say sleep is like a bus, it's you have to wait for that sleep pressure to build again. So you have to wait for the bus to come back round. One of the best things you can do is either go to bed when you're sleepy, or if you push through it because you have to, it might be you're working, for example, you can't always go to sleep when it's convenient, then make your environment as accessible to sleep as possible when you get home. So if you can, winding down before bed, making sure that you're staying off your phone, and that kind of thing. So I'll give you an example. One of the things I talk about in Answers in the Dark is Sunday night syndrome, or the Sunday scaries. And that's where a person at some point on a Sunday, if they work Monday to Friday, at some point on a Sunday, they have this moment of, I've got to go back to work tomorrow. And it's at that point that they start gearing up for work for the next day. And of course, that then leads to feelings of stress or feelings of worry. And there is no way your brain is going to authorize sleep if you're feeling stressed or worried about something. The good news is there's stuff you can do about it. But nevertheless, if you're stressed before sleep, there's no way your brain is going to authorize that. And so one of the things that tends to happen is people think, oh, well, I know what I'll do. I'll check my email before I go to work tomorrow so I can get ahead of whatever it is that's the week's going to bring. And without exception, whenever I've said to people, did it help? And they'll say, no, it made it worse. So that's one of the traps we fall into. We check our email, we go on social media and those kinds of things. And all that's going to do is stimulate the brain. There's no way it's going to get it ready for bed. So yeah, that's where I'm kind of coming from with the sleep bus. Basically, go to bed when you feel sleepy. If that's not possible for whatever reason, As soon as the circumstances allow, make the environment ready for sleep, and you should find before too long the bus will come back round again.
Brilliant. One of the things getting the environment ready, I did say, is turn the lights down. So you
Mm,
kind of got like dimmers on your lights and things
mm,
to make it more sort of,
definitely.
yeah. Wow, I can't believe how quickly this is going. We're at the 1 hour 18 minutes. At the beginning, I mentioned some of the other things you do, like the mindfulness
Mm.
and the counsellor. So if you can say now the roles that you do, how people can get in contact with you and what services you offer, that would be amazing, please.
Thank you so much. So my work now predominantly is as an author. So I do speaking events and workshops and things like that. If people want to find me, they can go to my website at delphiellis.com. I'm on social media at Delphi Ellis. You can find me all across social media at Delphi Ellis. If they're particularly interested in the book and want to know a bit more about it, the book has its own website, which is answersinthedark.com. And in the book, there is actually a page in the book which offers a password to a resources area. And that's got loads of videos in it. So mindfulness, what is mindfulness? It's got some mindfulness activities in there that appear in the book, and actually some that don't. So there's actually some bonus materials in the resources area that don't appear in the book. So yeah, that's pretty much where people can find me.
Excellent. That's really good. So Delphi, does the REM sleep pattern change at 4 a.m.? It is why people have angina and heart attacks trouble during this hour.
So we know that as the night goes on, the sleep cycles change. So at the beginning of the night, you are having more deep sleep than you are rapid eye movement sleep. So at the beginning of the night, you're dreaming for about 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. By the end of the night, you can be dreaming up to 30 to 45 minutes. There are so many different reasons why people say about 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning. And I talk about this, like I said, I've got a whole chapter in the book called The 4 a.m. Mystery. Some cultures believe that it's when certain things are happening in our bodies. Other people believe it's because if we're suffering with depression, that's when our brain is trying to figure stuff out. So there's all different reasons why we might be awake. But it does make the case for setting ourselves up for a good night's sleep. The better quality sleep we have, the more refreshing it's going to be, and the less likely we are to have too many kind of wakeful experiences during the night. But even that I talk about in the book. It's quite natural for us to wake up at night. It's what we do next that's going to make the difference between whether we have a good night's sleep or not.
I have got here ASMR videos are good for sleep. I don't know if because Pat did tell me about this, and there are two groups of people who love them, and people it just irritates. And I'm so sorry, I put it on and I hated it. It really got under my skin. I don't know, where are you with that? And are they good for sleep with some people?
No, I'm absolutely with you. It's like Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. So I watched one video where there was a lady, she was eating a gherkin. It was an ASMR video where a lady was eating a gherkin, and I had to switch it off almost immediately because sound is my dominant sense. So for me, I can hear a pin drop a mile away. I have the most it's one of my superpowers. I can hear a pin drop a mile away. So listening to somebody eating a gherkin into a microphone is like someone dragging their nails down a blackboard for me. So, but absolutely, I know some people, it's extremely soothing and relaxing. So I think it's whatever works for you.
Exactly. Fascinating talk, and she was able to give me the answer to my questions. Very impressed. Thank you both very much. You're welcome.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you. And again, lots and lots of thank yous coming in. Thank you, Paul and Delphi. Very interesting night. Love listening to you. Oh, this is a good one about clocks. Oh, I'm sorry. Clocks here. When the clocks change during spring and autumn, it affects me for a good week. Is this practice good? Is this practice good for us in general?
Yeah, so if I had my way, we'd get rid of daylight saving because we are rhythmic by nature, and our bodies are tuned into agricultural time. So although we now live in an industrial society, and if you've noticed, we've very conveniently split our days into 3 blocks of 8. So we have 8 hours so-called, for sleep, 8 hours for play, and 8 hours for work. But of course, we just were not designed like that. We are agricultural, and so we are governed by light and dark. Essentially, that's why we are governed by light and dark. So we experience, when we go into different times of the year and we put the clocks back, for example, we experience what's known as social jet lag. I talk about this a little bit in Answers in the Dark as well. Now, this happens in the same way for people that have a lie-in on the weekends. So if you're one of those people that Monday to Friday, you have to be up at 7 in the morning, and then you think to yourself on a Saturday, I'm going to have a cheeky lie-in, I'm going to get up at 10. Come Monday, as far as your brain is concerned, 10 o'clock is our new wake time. 10 a.m. is when we now get up. But of course, you're going to wrench yourself back out of bed again at 7 o'clock in the morning. So you are effectively 3 hours behind. And that is what we call social jet lag. So you can experience social jet lag without going anywhere. You don't have to go abroad to have social jet lag. But that's one of the reasons why some people struggle as the clocks go back, because effectively you're taking an hour's trip somewhere, you're losing an hour or gaining an hour of time. So that's why I think it's really helpful to try and keep your rhythms as natural as possible. Try to go to bed when you feel sleepy, get up when you feel wakeful.
Brilliant. So as it's coming to the end now, and there's so many questions coming up here that I know I've missed some, and some really important ones as well. So I really do apologise. Melanie, thank you for joining us. It seems to be here. I always feel awkward when somebody's just joined. It said hello. Yeah, we're about to go any second. But hello, welcome. I hope you enjoy watching it on the replay, or maybe you were here earlier, Melanie. But if there's just one bit of advice that you could give people in general to help improve their sleep, just one little thing, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, so Answers in the Dark is ultimately a book of hope. It's about giving people, the hope. The light always follows dark, and, the dawn always comes. I think for me, it would be very much about thinking about what's happening during the day that might be influencing your sleep at night. And remember that whatever it is, you will be able to find your way towards managing it, whether it's with the help of someone else, like a doctor or a counsellor, or whether it's through your own exploration. But as I say, the dark always, is followed by the light, and the dawn always comes. So you'll always find your way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating and amazing tonight. Thank you for everybody who's been watching. And again, I apologise for anybody that I've not read out their questions or said hello to. Next week is medium Alan Jones, so I hope you're here for that. Whatever you're doing right now, whether it's day or night for you, I usually say have an outstanding day or an outstanding sleep, but maybe I should just say sleep well to everybody, and dream well, and don't have nightmares. So I'm going to say good night now. Thank you again for watching. Thank you, Delphi. You're right, just to spend just 5 minutes afterwards just to finish up and chat after. Thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. Bye.